What's up, gang? I am Impending Duff. How are you? Thank you so much for checking out the YouTube channel. This is going to be my first official video for the channel, shot specifically for the channel, I should say. I'm going to show you guys today how stupid easy it is to do some marbling / granite effects on your terrain, base pieces, whatever you want marbling on. It's really easy. You're going to need an airbrush for this one. Sorry. Rattle can be used, but it gets a little chunky, a little choppy. It's not as smooth. The effect doesn't work as well. So we're going to check it out. We're going to dive right in here without any further ado. Here we go.
Alright, so I got myself a Shadow's Edge Urban Rubble 60mm base here. Primed it with Stynylrez gray from Badger. Going to be using dark neutral gray, a little dark warm gray, as well as some bold titanium white from the Pro Acryl line from Creature Caster. Plenty of flow improver going to be used, brand doesn't matter. For this first part, we're just going to load up the brush with a little bit of flow improver, do about a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 mixture of the dark neutral gray. Any dark gray will work just fine, but I'm going to make it kind of a transparent mixture here, nothing too crazy. Mix it up, get it about skim milk consistency here, and then we'll go ahead and we'll spray it on the base. Want to backflow the brush, make sure that any flow improver that got in the needle gets mixed in. Go ahead and give your base about 2-3 even coats, and then we'll move on to the dark warm gray from Pro Acryl. Again, any medium gray will work for this, it doesn't have to be Pro Acryl. Give it a little mixy, skim milk again. Now this time I'm just going to model the color in. I'm not going to do an even coat or anything. We're just going to break up the dark gray with a little bit of medium tone gray here. What that's going to do is give the base a little bit of depth. If you look at natural granite, natural marble, it has variation in the veining, so that's what we're emulating here. If it doesn't look dark enough, go ahead and spray a little bit more. Make sure that your spray is feathering out a bit. So this is the magic of the technique. This is your garden variety baby wipe. My wife gets like a box of 50,000 of these from Sam's Club. One side's stretchy, see that? But this side is not. We're going to work with the stretchy side, pulling the stretchy side apart. Now, I heard that if you pull this apart, it kind of like spider webs. The fibers kind of pull apart in a very distinct pattern. I was not getting it here. I don't know what they were talking about. I was really struggling with it. It looked like crap and it fell apart, so screw this thing. Then I moved on to like a basic Clorox type sanitizing wipe. Same thing, stretchy one way, tight the other. And it seemed to be pulling apart pretty well. Maybe I just wasn't patient enough, I don't know, but I started pulling this thing apart. It started working out really well. I was optimistic that it was going to work, and then I ripped it, got frustrated. And same thing, I just said screw this thing, let's move on. It doesn't look too bad, I'll probably try it again, but I had a little bit of an idea after I said screw this thing. I remembered I had this chilling in my Halloween box, and I remember spreading it out on my bushes in the front yard thinking, cool, this actually looks like spiderweb. It's cheap, it's $2.99, I'm sure you can find it on Amazon. When I'm spreading it apart, doesn't it kind of look like veining on marble? So what you do, or what I did, spread it out, get it nice and tight, and then start pulling it apart and influencing it into different spots. You want to have nice clumps of the fiber, but you also want to have really open spots for the paint to get through. We don't want it consistently one texture. Keep manipulating it until you get to where you want, and then just twist it from the bottom side. It's got to be tight. So now we'll load up the airbrush with some bold titanium white from Pro Acryl. This is going to be a 2-to-1 straight mix. We're not going to go any thinner than that. 2 parts flow improver to 1 part paint. You're still going to have that kind of skim milk consistency though. Do a little mixy, and you'll notice that I actually messed with the spider web a little bit more, so there's more defined chunks of actual spider web and more defined open cells of nothingness. Spray an even coat, let it dry, and then you are going to go ahead and spray a second coat. Now it's important, you gotta let this stuff dry completely before you take the spider web off, okay? Otherwise it's gonna smear the paint. Now let's watch the magic happen here. Boom. Looks like marble to me. Of course it's a little whack right now, but once I start painting up the debris and dirt and edges and break up the center line and whatnot, then it's really gonna start popping off, so let's get into that. Notice how inconsistent the veining is. So to paint the rubble, I'm going to use some black brown from Acryl. Any type of deep brown works just fine. Now this is a textured base. It's a resin base from Shadow's Edge Miniatures, so you really got to get that paint in there. You can't just brush on a smooth coat, you know. It's got texture to it, so make sure you get it into all those cracks and crevassiers and whatnot. Let it dry. Here's what it looks like once I got all those surfaces painted. Starting to look a little better. Now once it's dry, I want to seal it with some gloss varnish, okay? What that's going to do is allow the next step to kind of seep into the cracks and crevassiers and whatnot. Again, we don't want it to influence the top of the surfaces or anything. So I'm going to go with a little strong tone here, mixed with some flow improver, about 50-50, 1-to-1. Now, I always thought Duncan's just doesn't get it when he says that consistency, but here I am, I'm like, okay, you're going to mix it to about that consistency as I rake it up the side of the well there. You want it to be transparent, but you don't want it to be super transparent to where you lose all the pigment. Just like any wash stage, we all know how to wash, just kind of glob it on there, you know. Let it do its thing, get into the crevices. I'm not going to wash the marble surface, okay? So once that's dry, we get the big secret here. It's not a secret. Elf makeup brushes. They're like $1. Get yourself some. Then we're going to move on to the Citadel Sylvaneth Bark for the very first dry brush layer. Load your brush up, work it into the bristles. Then we're going to remove about 3/4 to 4/5 of the paint and dry brush it onto that dark brown. Now just flick your brush back and forth. Don't go side to side, back and forth. Don't do circles. Stay in one direction. Poof. There it is. We all know how to dry brush. Once that's done, then we're going to move on to some Tyrant Skull Dry from Citadel. And this time we're going to remove a little bit more paint than we did from the Sylvan Bark. Really work it into the bristles there, and then remove almost the vast majority of the paint, okay? We don't want that paint to really take over. Now it's important, barely touch the surface. Flick your brush kind of sharply, quickly, and just kiss the tops of that texture. There it is. It's a little bright, it's a little abstract. It could work, but we're going to do it a little bit further here. We're going to do some Agrax. But I'm going to mix the Agrax about 3-to-1 here with Flow Improver, so it is a little transparent. So basically that shade is only going to stay in the recesses. It's going to leave our highlights nice and popping. Go ahead and glop it on there. When it's dry, we're going to move on to some really cool pigments. This is VMS Spot On Pigments. I'm going to start with EU Dark Earth, okay? Just kind of jab your brush into the pigment, right? Use a shitty brush, don't use a good brush. And then just kind of dot it on there. If you get a little more than you want on there, you can shake it off, you can do whatever you want. Just don't activate it with any type of moisture, otherwise it'll seep in. Then I kind of feather in a little bit around the edges here and there. Just work with it. You'll see how it goes. There's no right or wrong really with dry pigments, especially when you're emulating dirt. See, I kind of get a little bit off to the edge there. That's okay. We're going to weather the surface of the marble too. So I like to start with this darker kind of mocha, kind of dark chocolate color. I guess mocha's not dark chocolate, but you get the point. It's a darker color, right? Much like painting, dry pigment is very similar to painting. There it is with the first color. I like to layer different colors. So to give it a little depth, I'm going to move on to this washed red earth. And it's a little bit of a richer color. It's kind of more of the mocha color I was just talking about versus that dark chocolate. I'm going to be more selective with this, okay? I'm just going to put it in certain spots. I'm not going to go all over the base. I'm just going to kind of put it towards some raised edges, some larger areas here, just to give it a little bit of depth. When we activate it, it's going to look almost all identical, but once that activation, that pigment binder dries, it'll all look different tones. It'll kind of blend together, if you will. It'll look real good. Just use it sparingly, and then we'll move on to the fixer part. This is secret weapon pigment fixer. You can just dab it on. Use a synthetic brush. This stuff will ruin your sable brushes. So it's essentially lighter fluid. Not really. It's white spirits, but it is flammable, so be careful. So you can dab it on, and capillary action works really well. Kind of just spreads out. You dab it, and it actually spreads out really well. But there's another way. If you don't want to disturb the pigment, you don't want to get pigment in your bristles, you can load up your bristles and use a skewer or a toothpick or something and just kind of flick it onto the surface of the pigment. That way you're not getting a bunch of different colored pigments into your paintbrush there. And you can see it works really well. It spreads out really well. It affixes the pigment really well. So maybe I got a little bit of pigment where I didn't want it, or I kind of want to feather it out. Just use that brush that you were flicking the fixer on and kind of move it around. You can even remove it from the peaks of some of the highlights so that you can bring those highlights back. You see on that big hunk, it's kind of a nice flat surface, but there's a little influence of pigment there. Don't be afraid to mess around with it. Then of course we got to paint the rim. I like a black rim. We all know how to paint a rim, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but, you know, do 2 clean coats of black or whatever color you want, and booyakasha. There it is. Beautifully done marble weathered base. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I plan to do at least one a week and possibly do a more lengthy one once a month where I get a little more in-depth. If you did enjoy it, make sure you give it a thumbs up, do the little subscribe thing or whatever you kids do here on YouTube to show some love. I'll put links in the description below for all the products that I used in the video. And if you did enjoy the content, you can check out my Twitch channel, Impending Duff. It's on Twitch, obviously. I stream right now Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard till midnight. Feel free to use that time to ask me any questions live, or just come hang out and listen to some metal and watch some painting. I also do this full time. This is my full-time gig. I teach at conventions like Adepticon, Gen Con, Warfare Weekend, etc. So I also naturally have a Patreon where I kind of focus around the teaching aspect of things. Patrons will all get early access to all of my videos, as well as all of my PDF tutorials that are exclusive to Patreon. A bunch of different tiers for support, as well as one-on-one video lessons with me. They start at $20 an hour. I appreciate it if you give that a looky-loo, and that'll be down in the description as well, guys. Again, thanks for hanging out, and thanks to all my patrons that are showing up on the stream right now. Have a good one.